James Melendez, thank you for joining me today. This topic is about dignity and respect. It's a stakeholder relationship methodology and culture. Stay tuned and I'll tell you about how this is applicable to any organizational type. Dignity and respect is not just a nice to have today, it is a must have, and it's for all organizational types. That could be a governmental organization or perhaps a nonprofit or for-profit or other type of organization. So dignity and respect can be lacking in your organization, and it does have an effect in terms of maybe looking for talent. It could be in terms of suppliers, and I think this is a really essential component. So again, it's not just a nice to have, it's a must have for a variety of reasons, and all your stakeholders are important to your organization and helping your organization to be a success. Now, I always start off with a word cloud, especially for a topic like this. I think they're essential because it gives an opportunity for an audience member like yourself to really select these things that probably are meaningful to your organization or to you personally. And so just stop this video for a moment and just take a look at these things to see what might match and resonate with you. Now, I'll begin. What is dignity and respect? And in this conversation, I'll use the words DNR and dignity and respect. They mean the same thing. What is dignity and respect? It is a methodology to gauge organizational fitness of relationship to all stakeholders. This methodology is to map, monitor, foster, and encourage positive interactions and relationships. So an organization begins in this journey, in this roadmap from the beginning point, which is a methodology, and it becomes a culture over time. I'll talk specifically how it can get there. To me, this is a really important feature. When you think of culture, I think it's the highest compliment an organization can have. So what a culture represents to an organization is something that is actually an afterthought. People don't even think about it consciously. They just behave, react, and respond in ways that really exemplify DNR. DNR does not happen on accident. It happens by purpose. It happens by support, by executive support, and it's also taught. It's learned. In addition to that, it's something that the organization can work towards, and it is renewed by the organization year over year. Why is DNR important? Simply because when the organization is created, it's an instantaneous moment. Stakeholders are created. Thus, the journey begins, and the need to act with DNR is vital. Every organization has multiple stakeholders. Each and every stakeholder deserves to be treated with DNR, dignity and respect. So organizations don't operate in a vacuum. Organizations are monitored, rated, ranked, reviewed, and discussed, and even reported on in some cases, because maybe the monitoring or the rating is happening in Glassdoor or Yelp. So a lot of stakeholders will air their concerns in many ways, in many forums, in many medias. And how have they treated the stakeholder communities? Each stakeholder is treated differently, and perhaps some aren't even treated or managed at all. That's a mistake, especially in the world of competition. Customer expectations are not just about pricing. They're concerned about how they're treated by the organization, and that relationship, be it a long one or a short one, can end pretty abruptly, and that's something that can be managed in terms of dignity and respect. I'll give some examples later. Attracting the best candidates as well as retaining that talent, and there's much, much more that is in the framework in terms of stakeholder management. There's many reasons and needs for a DNR culture. It's paramount. And here's just some very easy examples. It was effortless to pull this out. This is happening in all organizational types. This is where I think organizations can look at how they're doing their business and managing their stakeholders, and to think about a more holistic way of addressing a DNR aspect to their stakeholder communities. One person said to me, she said, "I'm embarrassed. I'm always having to apologize for the company I work for." She works for a financial services company. Now, the U.S. overall customer satisfaction rate is the lowest in 14 years at 73.6, and that was reported in 2020. United Airlines flight number 3411, Dr. Dow, a physician traveling from Chicago to Louisville, Kentucky, was dragged off the flight. It was recorded on video. It's still, many videos are out there today and will probably always be there. In addition to that, there's a Wikipedia page. Oscar Munoz was a CEO at the time, and his response immediately was not in favor of Dr. Dow. It took a couple of days for him to give an apology to Dr. Dow. Now, stock prices dropped that week, and also United received a lot of attention on social media. People were very dismayed who saw this and made comments on social media. And also it got the attention of the White House, U.S. Congress, Illinois General Assembly, the Union for the Pilots, Chicago City Council, Chicago Police Department, and it goes on and on and on. If there was a dignity and respect culture, Dr. Dow would not have been dragged from the plane. And ultimately, Oscar Munoz, who continued his CEOship until 2020, he became the executive chairman in 2021. And that's something where I think does not show, at least in terms of, say, customer satisfaction for United Airlines. And it's pretty much where it was in 2017 to 2020. So not much has changed. I hope this never happens to anyone on this carrier or any other carrier. I think dignity and respect, perhaps at United Airlines, has not increased. So United Airlines, based on that experience, will always be under that magnifying glass because people are concerned. DNR is essential because guess what? Your customers are essential to your organization if you're a for-profit business. They're a very important stakeholder. And while organizations say that customers are important, sometimes the experience they have is quite different. Now, this is a representation of your organization. Look at this in terms of who your stakeholders can be. And perhaps there are stakeholders that are not listed, but you can create this map yourself to understand who your stakeholders are. So I have a word clock here divided into 4 separate regions. You can do this, say, in a workshop. Now, these can be examples in your organization of indignity and disrespect. Now, I listed this in terms of, say, executive leadership, employment, recruiting, as well as customers or consumer base and recipients. To me, I think this is really important. I divided this into 4 quarters, and you could actually do probably one of these per page. So you could have a word clock for, say, maybe talking about leadership. Now, recruiting could be essential to your organization, and I hear many organizations have a hard time recruiting. But how are the recruiting practices? So how are the recruiters treating the applicant stakeholders? Yes, they do have a stake in what they're doing. They wouldn't be spending the time that they do spend. For example, multi-hour project interviews. I've had several of these where an organization will say, I have to do a PowerPoint and it has to include these features and characteristics and it has to be this long, etc. And ultimately I spend maybe 3-4 hours on it. So I present the proposal, the project, or whatever I'm working on in terms of the PowerPoint. And I find out later that there was a preferred candidate for that role. No matter what I did or how well I performed, I was not going to get that job. So why allow me to spend 4 or 5 hours on something that is really futile? Maybe there's just too many interviews. Perhaps there's a long lag time between when the decisions are made for that particular organization to decide on a candidate. Perhaps contractors are let on quarter by quarter. Oh yes, we will have a headcount available soon, maybe next year, maybe next half year. Contractors are often in a delicate position. Some organizations don't even allow a one-on-one with their contractors to the managers, which is very unfortunate because that is really a point of success or disengagement for that particular individual. Employment. Lack of active listening is something that employees talk about in their engagement surveys. Lack of timely feedback. I know people who have gotten feedback 1 year later in terms of, say, their annual performance review, and it was something that they could have known about 1 year previous and made a change. Customers and recipients. So customers, how does your customer service organization talk to your customer base? I've heard many times, including myself, where I'm recited terms and conditions. That's the terms and conditions of this company. And that's supposed to be not just a conversation starter, but a conversation end. A lot of customer service organizations don't listen with empathy and with heart. And your customers are asking for that. So I'd ask you this. If you lose your customers, how much more effort does it take to get a new customer? They're pretty expensive. Ask your marketing department. How does the executives, leadership, and managers show up? Is there a lack of action management? Is there, lack of communication? Maybe excess and uncontrolled meetings happen. So perhaps meetings that your organization team members go to, your individual contributor community go to, don't have an agenda. Perhaps they're personality driven versus process driven. This is really on the shoulders of the leadership and the managers to making sure meetings are efficient. So these are things that they can work on. Dignity and respect has a relationship, say, to diversity and inclusion, as well as ESG, if your company is a for-profit, publicly held company, environmental, social, and governance. I'll talk about each of these. Now, dignity and respect and ESG. I'll talk about these because I think they have the similar intent and understanding of the organism itself. When I look at, say, DNR, dignity and respect, it's organizational relationship with stakeholders. It's inward looking outward. ESG is outward looking inward. That is, ESG community are investors or perhaps analysts who review companies and give them a ranking and rating so that they could be placed on a fund, mutual fund, for example, or other investment targets that can include your company. And I think this is an important feature because maybe it is your investment relations manager that perhaps your dignity and relationship can partner with to understand what does the outside world look at. So it is messages, actions, promises, and intent. So all these things come together and do have a common bond between ESG and DNR. Now, dignity and respect is 100% stakeholder engagement, inward and outward. It's all relationship types. DNR is charted with specific purpose, goals, and intent. It's measured and it's measurable. Diversity and inclusion is one way. It's often just 100% inward. It only looks at employees, regular employees, does not include contractors and consultants. And yes, some diversity and inclusion programs do include contractors and consultants, but it's pretty rare. Focus is on just one relationship type. D&I is a proposal that's often created versus chartered. When you create a charter, it's results oriented and it's not just letting things remain stagnant. So I think there is a slight difference there. And also, I think diversity and inclusion programs can be very ambiguous and the goals are also ambiguous. Implementing dignity and respect. Now, D&R is a total organizational methodology for the entire community of stakeholders. So when you think about your workshop before you get started, have a list before you go in, because ultimately there's probably going to be more stakeholders than you originally anticipated. It is a comprehensive program honing in on making improvements in relationships and the way of being at your organization. So pivoting the organization to be best in class, say being set apart from competition or being sought after by talent and other stakeholders. It's leading with outstanding, not best practices, but outstanding practices. Emotional intelligence, I think it's really important to do EQ, but also what I call EMPQ, which is empathy intelligence. I would say in terms of intent, the most important feature is driving out fear and ingraining courage. This is probably speaking to a lot of people out there, and I've been in organizations where I think fear is rampant and there is no ingraining of courage whatsoever. When you do this, I think you're going to be a much more productive organization. You're going to work on actual problems versus problems that are created where they could have been avoided. So actions are essential. It's about ownership of those actions, activation, participation. Action item management. That's really important because when I look at this, it's really a scope of team excellence. Team excellence is really making sure there's a transparency of action items, and are they being handled? Are they being taken care of? Are they really being tracked? And so the transparency is absolutely important. So you can see me address the point of organizational racetrack up here in a video that I have that's a separate video. Organizational racetracks look at future actions so there are no surprises in that organization. And that's one way to help this organization understand, especially as it relates to D&R. I think one of the most important areas that can really have a quick hit is communication. It is key. It is really thinking about, it's not just a WebEx or Zoom or a town hall, an email, or a specific meeting. It's all of that plus more. Is the conversation acronym or jargon free? Is it cliche free? And I think that's really important because getting to clarity, not everybody understands all the jargon or acronyms. Perhaps cliches people tune out because they've heard it so often before, they're not really sure it's an important feature of that conversation. And I think really I look at team excellence as a way of getting participation to happen in every single meeting. And that was very unfortunate that never happened. But ultimately what happened in that organization is people tuned out. We should also be thinking about organizations that can promote conversations that have a lot of EQ, that have a lot of empathy, that are clear, concise. I do believe dignity and respect methodology can get an organization to this better platform of being. And I think that's going to be appreciated by all stakeholders in your community. A dignity and respect program should have the following features. It should have a proposal that is taken to the executive team, the senior executive leadership team. It's chartered. It's something that's really thought about in terms of who are those program members, and they're going to charter this out so that it really is a viable organization. It has a future forward-looking mission, and that's something that's really important in terms of chartering. I believe in chartering so much. I actually have a charter video right up here, and I think it's essential not just for, say, projects, but it's also essential for programs or initiatives. Written plans are essential, so you implement the plan. You will see some features that come out in terms of data analysis, continuous feedback, and reporting. That's essential to see what is working well, what could be improved, and just looking at features that perhaps you didn't expect to have happen. So data analysis, continuous feedback, and reporting are essential to look at how the implementation is going. How does this look like in terms of the organization? Is it mapping to what are your success points? What are those success gateways that are being registered over time? It's also about continuous improvement. What could you do to improve what you've implemented? So I do believe this needs to be renewed year over year. It's like a strategic plan. So what happened in the base year that this plan begins is something that's going to be different in the first year, second year, and third year. So organizational fitness. Is your organization ready to make a change and adopt dignity and respect? And if it isn't, what do you need to help the organization to get there? Assess org's greatest needs and opportunities. And you definitely need your senior level endorsement and sponsorship. And resources, maybe it's organizational development team, investor relations of a publicly held company, continuous improvement team, organizational learning teams, as well as change management. future state. So you go from a DNR methodology to an organization where it's ingrained in culture. That is the greatest compliment to your organization. I'm here to help you. So if you have questions or comments, my email address is down below. Now be sure to subscribe to my channel. It's James All About Business, but it's also about just organizations in general. Please share this video with someone in your organization that is interested in the subject matter. Thank you for watching. I will see you back here again for another video topic in James All About Business. Thank you so much.